Our gospel reading this morning comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 16. And here Jesus is talking with his closest disciples in a private setting on the night of his arrest. And we begin at verse 12 in the inclusive Bible version. I have much more to tell you, but you can't bear to hear it now. When the Spirit of truth comes, she will guide you into all truth. She won't speak on her own initiative. Rather, she'll speak only what she hears, and she'll announce to you the things that are yet to come. In doing this, the Spirit will give glory to me, for she will take what is mine and reveal it to you. Everything that God has belongs to me. This is why I said that the Spirit will take what is mine and reveal it to you. Thus ends the reading. Here, as in much of John's gospel, Jesus is preparing his closest followers for what comes next. And in the process, he's saying some pretty confusing things. It had to be confusing to them. They didn't know what was coming. And even as we read it now, it's confusing and maybe a little worrisome. Have you ever had someone important in your life, whether it's at work or at home or whenever, say to you, I have something to tell you, but please wait until later? Huh? Wait. And how many tailspins of anxiety have been triggered by these words, can we talk later? Our minds anxiously try to prepare us or try to imagine, or not really, and usually to the very worst. What could they possibly have to tell us? Are they angry with us? Are they going to fire us? Are they leaving us? Are they sick? Are they dying? How often do we burn up time and energy imagining worst-case scenarios when somebody tells us that? Can we talk later? Or wait till later, I have something to tell you. And in the end, usually, it's not as bad as we worried. Still, the disciples, they have plenty to be worried about. Even before Jesus says, I have much to tell you, but you can't bear to hear it now. He says in verse 2 of the same chapter, they will expel you from synagogues, and indeed the hour is coming when anyone who kills you will claim to be serving God. Huh? So the disciples are really wondering what is going to come. And it's often the unknown future, no matter what it might be, even when we aren't given clues, that worries us. We can plan for the future, we can train for it, we can even pray for it, but we can't know the future. So the most important thing that Jesus tells his followers in this passage is something like, you are not alone in this. Specifically, in verse 13, he says, when the Spirit of truth comes, she will guide you. The Spirit, whom we celebrated last week in Pentecost, the powerful divine wind, holy breath closer than our breathing, she will guide you. And yes, this version says she, and I like that about this inclusive version because there is a mothering aspect of the divine. We too could use some wise divine mothering about now. Because you and I, as some sort of followers of Jesus, we too are headed into unknown territory. Not just our personal selves, but the global territory. Wars and their aftermath, gun violence, political hypocrisy and corruption threatening democracy, life on earth in peril due to human greed. And then there's Mountain Rise, who's approaching a change in leadership. And Deborah and I know we are about to leave a community that we love. Each of us has reason to feel anxious about things. Again, the words of Jesus to those first followers apply even now, even to us. When the Spirit of truth comes, she will guide you. In other words, you are not alone in this. None of us are. We need some of that wise, divine, mothering wisdom about now. So how does that work? The presence of divine wisdom, the Spirit, I believe, happens most of all and best of all in community, in what you have right here. Jesus taught his followers in community. The Spirit was first decisively experienced in community, a la Pentecost. Experienced divine presence, that happens in community. And community happens when people enter into relationships of trust and purpose. I believe that God has wired us that way, for lack of a better way of putting it. You may have experienced that sense of community, maybe with Mountain Rise, worshiping, serving others, organizing, planning, caring. And maybe you've experienced that community while making music together, when everything's clicking and there's a, as musicians say, a groove. You may have experienced that working in sync with other people as volunteers or even in your job. After serving others, you sometimes get a glimpse of that. And then sometimes, maybe you've experienced that by surviving a harrowing experience with somebody else. And only you know what you've been through, but you have a bond. Maybe you've experienced that community while witnessing something that is wonder-filled. I think animals sometimes even do that. I read about a chimpanzee study in the wild where they noticed that the chimpanzees went to a crest of a hill at sunset and just sat together. Even they know about community. We experience our common humanity then. We experience our connectedness to one another. But also, in the midst of that, we experience our connectedness to the one source of all, that divine Spirit. Well, 30 years ago, as Deborah and I, with our then 5- and 7-year-old boys, made our way home across the Pacific from New Zealand, where I'd done a ministry exchange, and we weren't sailing across the Pacific, we were in an airplane. And we stopped for refueling, as we knew it would, in Fiji, so we'd arranged to stay in this archipelago of 800 small islands and 2 larger islands. And we were able to stay for about 8 or 10 days. I can't remember exactly. Fiji had just experienced a coup. So at the airport, polite soldiers with ammo belts, AK-47s, and a sulu. A sulu is a skirt that you wear if you're a male in Fiji. These happen to be camouflage. I brought home a floral one. But they went through all of our luggage, made sure we weren't bringing weapons or contraband, who knows what. But we stayed on this small island called Malololai. And I don't know what that means in Fijian, but it was mostly an open-air resort. And resort, yes, but it's not the kind of thing you think of. Certainly isn't what you would get here, but we loved it. The rooms were basically stucco cabins with thatched roofs. No screens on the windows or doors or anything. The pool was the coral lagoon. Swim at your own risk. It kept out most of the sharks. Dining was in an open-sided cafe and was often a buffet. And on Sunday, we were invited to church that the small village had in a chapel that was open air again and atop a rise, the island's highest point, which wasn't that high. It was just January, so it was still Christmastide, and the pastor apologized when we got there, saying that most of the worship would be in Fijian, but we might recognize some of the hymns and were invited to join in our own language. And we felt warmly welcomed. And we prayed when they prayed, not knowing their language or what they were praying. We prayed our own prayers. And when they started singing in Fijian, we were happily surprised that there were some classic hymns and Christmas carols, and we sang along what we could remember, because the words were also in Fijian in the hymnals. And they seemed happy to have us singing with them in English while they sang in Fijian. And when the final benediction came, we felt that we were in community with them. We had shared our humanity across culture and language. Divine Spirit had woven us together. The next day was here, Martin Luther King Day. And it happened that I was walking across the compound and was passing through the open air dining area, and I heard the radio, which can't remember if it was a radio set or coming through a speaker, but there was the unmistakable voice of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech coming through the whole area. And standing near the radio was the Fijian pastor. And I stood nearby, and we both nodded to each other, and we stood there listening, eventually with tears in our eyes. And when the speech finished, our eyes met, and we each said to each other, "Bless you, my friend." And then we left, never to meet again. But there between us was Divine Spirit. Community, not just in faith, but also in our shared humanity. When the Spirit of truth comes, she will guide you into all truth, Jesus told his followers. And I have absolute confidence that the Spirit dwells among you now and will indeed guide you into truth, into deeper community, into shared ministry as a church, and will help you to continue to adapt the mission of this congregation to serve God in the midst of this world. I know this to be true. As Martin Luther King said, faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. Amen.